Ben Shapiro, I hadn't even remembered the story, but a space launch was essentially delayed. Is that the crux of this?
So there was supposed to be an Artemis I space shuttle test. We got close to the moon, but the goal, I think, is to get it to Mars. But the shuttle test was delayed because there was an issue with the engine coolant, so they had to delay it till Saturday. But Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff were on scene to watch the launch, and Shapiro was reacting to a statement that she made, saying that she's hoping for more, diverse ranks in astronauts.
Oh, so like the most pressing story imaginable. Yes. The a space launch was temporarily delayed, and the vice president made a comment about diversity.
Yeah, about wokeness.
As opposed to I do want to add that it's thought. Let me just say this joke real quick. As opposed to the diversity of thought in NASA, which is like having Nazis like Werner von Braun lead the institution. I think diversity inclusion stuff is probably needed at NASA. I think they probably have a pretty bad culture.
Yeah.
All right, so Ben Shapiro has gripping commentary on this.
The equity agenda, by the way, was promised. I mean, Joe Biden promised that this is going to infuse every area of his administration, down to the stupidest parts of it. So this week, Artemis I, which is supposed to be setting the stage for the attempt to reach the moon again. The Artemis I launch was canceled again, or scrubbed after an engine issue. According to CNN, the launch of NASA's historic Artemis I moon mission has been postponed after the team was unable to work through an issue with one of the rocket's 4 engines. Okay, but the really important thing is that when we do go to the moon, we have a lesbian on the moon. Lesbians on the moon. This is what we need. It sounds like a bad pornography. Anyway, here is Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, explaining that the key to space exploration is that we send up a diverse group of people to space. I don't know why that's the key to space exploration. I thought it would be, the most qualified people that we ought to send to space. Oh, my God. We shouldn't actually, again, it's like they are just casting a movie. They're just casting a movie in their own minds.
This idea... So a couple things. There's been lesbians in space. Sally Ride famously, although she was closeted during her life because people like Ben Shapiro had their way. But yeah, she was a lesbian. Had a longtime partner of like almost 30 years. And this fetishization of the most qualified, as if like these are perfect meritocracies, is just ludicrous. Like, I think the idea that you can't find qualified people elsewhere, but like, I don't know, it needs to be some sort of like kid that grew up on like a Iowa dairy farm or whatever we theorize astronauts needing to be. Like, it's just silly.
Well, I mean, it's childish too. This again, I return always to this guy being the facts over feelings guy, but the underpinning of so many of his arguments, which are really just emotional outbursts, is this religious belief in our systems as being perfect, and often that goes hand in hand with deifying the will of the founding fathers, and treating them like they're patron saints. And it also is this nonsensical emotional belief in a meritocracy that doesn't exist by every definition of the word.
Yeah. Also, it says a lot about you if you say lesbians on the moon. That sounds like porno. Like, the only time you think of lesbians is on Pornhub. It says a lot about you.
And quick question: who's casting the movie then in their heads? Shapiro or the libs?
Yeah.
Who's the only one who mentioned lesbian porn here?
Yes.
My man.
Good point.
Might want to chill with that.
Honestly, to me, it sounds more like a 50s, 60s, like mainstream sci-fi movie, to be quite
frank. Like a B movie or like
like Plan 9 from Outer Space or something like that. Yeah.
A Roger Corman or Ed Wood film, lesbians in space.
It's also and of course, in that movie, they would be badass. Like, they would be like the ones running the show. Yeah.
I was
Go
gonna say,
ahead,
it's also
Brandon.
surprising
Yeah.
because we just know that, the right wing doesn't care about funding NASA, much less about who we send into space. Trump was slashing NASA's budget to, I guess, allocated towards the Space Force or some shit. So it's like, it's rich that someone who supported Trump could be like, well, I just care about NASA programs having the best quality equipment and personnel. It's like, well, they won't be able to afford it with the kind of budget that you were trying to give them. So it can't possibly be a real concern of yours. But this is about the aspirational quality of being an astronaut and who should be allowed to aspire to that and who shouldn't be allowed to aspire to that.
Yeah.
Like being president, one of the biggest concerns that right wingers have with Obama being president was this kind of, and I would say overblown concern that it was going to allow for just a measure of our population to aspire to better and just not be in the grips of deprivation, and also allow people like Ben Shapiro to pretend like they could one day be astronauts, or to allow other, let's say, be honest, grown ass Tom Cruise aged men to pretend like they're going to one day still be fighter pilots. That's just a big portion of our, culture, is like Bruce Willis. And I can remember Matt Damon blowing up asteroids in space. And if that were like a lesbian, that movie wouldn't be as impactful to me personally. And so I don't want to think about astronauts being anything other than like Buzz Aldrin type figures. And it's like, it's very
It's the
childish.
same reason they mock.
Thing.
It's the same reason they mock, by the way, trans people or gay people being in the military, because that threatens their wish fulfillment and cosplay of the kind of fantasy that they would want to engage in.
But it's interesting too that Blake Masters had the same point in that video we watched in the first half about how I don't care if everyone at the Fed is a black lesbian as long as they're qualified, or with Shapiro basically kind of inverting it a tiny bit, being like, that's the only reason you want them in space, not because they're great astronauts. It's all, I mean, the underpinning there is basically, it needs to be a pure, like you said, meritocratic process. But if they are gay, or if they are black, or if they are another race, it's probably affirmative action.
That's what it is, right? It's a way to undercut non-white straight. If you're not a straight white male, you probably got there from affirmative action.
Also,
I just don't even.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it's just weird to think about what they conceptualize as an astronaut, because they're clearly just thinking like the Air Force people. But most astronauts are probably just like nerdy scientists.
Yes,
most people who are going into space are just geologists who are studying moon rocks. They're they're just not they're just not just like the random thick-necked white guy you would cast to be like Jack Reacher or something. They're just nerds.
It's a fascist view of who belongs in space, right? It needs to be like the Ubermensch. Then it's like you see football players up there and stuff like that, instead of people who have gone through and have very high educational attainment, which, by the way, is something that is stratified along race and class and gender lines.
Iron Sky is a documentary, and for those of you who don't know.
Well, we just saw a whole culture war outrage from the right just a few months ago about a space movie with a lesbian in it, and that was Lightyear.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And if you actually watch that movie, the character who is a lesbian is like Buzz Lightyear's partner in the movie, and she's more talented than him at space adventuring. And the only thing that gives away that she's a lesbian is she shares a quick peck with another woman in space in their space town they live in, and they went nuts over that. How dare they portray this in a movie in space?